Hey everybody, I'm working on Nathan's clock, and I had to take the movement back out. It kept cuckooing, and sometimes you could take the dial off to figure out what's going on, but in this case I couldn't, so I had to do something else. I had to take the movement out, and I'm going to show you why it kept cuckooing. As you can see, the snail is bent, this being the snail. It is hitting, sorry, the rack is bent. I'm sorry, the rack. This being the snail. What I was getting at, the rack is touching the gear on the snail, and you could see it. So when I move the rack stop lever out of the way, two things should happen. The snail should drop, but it's not dropping because it is bent. It's hitting, this rack is hitting the snail, so I have to bend it to prevent it from hitting the snail. It should be dropping. I shouldn't have to force it. So let me bend it and do another function test on it. I don't know how it got bent. So now when I move the rack out of the way, it drops on its own. So now I'm going to do a function test. And as you, that first time, this tab didn't catch the snail, so the rack stop lever, the cam with the gathering pin was not lifting the rack. So that's why you have to make sure that the snail doesn't come forward, and here when it comes forward, you cannot put the wheel on for the minute hand. Let me get that wheel out and show you what I'm talking about. In this case, the wheel is on the minute hand. It's got a square hole in it which fits on the minute arbor on that square, but if the snail comes forward, you no longer see that square, and so when the rack drops, it could fall behind the snail. So make sure that it doesn't fall behind the snail. And like I said, when I do a function test, I hit it pretty hard. The gathering pin is not lifting the rack, and that's because the rack is bent too much. So I need to bend it down some. So now let me see if the gathering pin lifts the rack. It still is barely catching the rack, so I need to bend it some more. See, in that case, it's not bent right in this area right here. So I need to bend it some more and bend it down. Now what's going on? It's still not bent right because it's not catching the rack. That gathering pen, again, if you could see it, it's barely catching the rack. So when you put pressure on it like I'm doing, and that's why I say you need to put pressure on it, that way you can see whether it's going to function right. So I'm going to bend it some more. I'm doing all this without taking the rack off. Probably my mistake. If I could do it without taking the rack off, I'm going to do it. I'm still not satisfied with that. I need to bend the rack down some more. That works fine there, but what happens when it gets to the 12 o'clock position? You see what I'm seeing? The rack stop lever is moving over too far and it's binding. I think it might be bent also. So let me straighten that out. Stand by. Let me see if I can, there it goes again. It is catching, if you can see this, it is catching the bird post and the cam with gathering pen, and it's binding. If I put pressure on it, it goes back down. And it's not doing it all the time, but it's doing it sometimes. There, it did it again. So I think that at this point, I think it's best to take the rack and snail and this lift lock lever off and straighten it out. So stand by. I discovered the problem why this is binding the rack stop lever. The friction washer is not where it needs to be. It needs to be almost touching this movement. So what's happening is during the process of it lifting the rack, this is coming forward, and when it comes forward, there it's stuck again. So I'll put that friction washer back down, and that will fix the issue. Okay, the friction washer is back where it needs to be, up close to the plate. Like I said, you don't want it all the way touching the plate because friction will cause the rack stop lever not to be able to lift up. And so, I need to put the other parts on, but as you can see, it's working just fine. So I'm going to go ahead and put the other parts on, and then we'll come back. I got the other parts on. Do another function test here. Always turn the hands clockwise, and there's a purpose behind that. They say a rack and snail, you could turn them counterclockwise. I agree, but I disagree with that, and maybe I'll make a different video saying why. If you tell your customers that, okay, you could turn your hands counterclockwise to set them, let's say, now you have to imagine that the clock is running. We'll say you just got through striking 12, but it's actually 11 o'clock. And so if you tell your customers that they could turn the hands counterclockwise, and I'm turning the hands counterclockwise, and I'm putting pressure on the grate wheel, because the clock is running. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it clockwise again. I was doing this a while ago, and just for the video, and it kept cuckooing just like it is now. See? And this is what happens when you go counterclockwise and then clockwise. It messes up. So do not tell your customers that they can turn their hands counterclockwise. You can, depending on where it's setting and depending on how far you're going to turn them. If you turn them more than 2 or 3 hours counterclockwise, it's going to do just like this is doing. This clock was working perfectly until I turned these hands counterclockwise. So now I have to get it in sync again, but your customers ain't going to always know what to do. You know, I'm turning it clockwise now, and it's still not catching. The turning your hands counterclockwise causes this rack stop lever to not drop the way it's supposed to. So don't let your customers turn their hands counterclockwise. That's what I'm getting at. And some people disagree with me. A lot of people disagree with me on different things. This is only just from my experience with working on these clocks. I'm not an engineer. I just know what happens when you do the wrong things. So let's say your clock is 11:45 and it should be 25 minutes till 12. In a case like that, yes, turn your hands counterclockwise and then adjust the pendulum because it's running too fast. But if it's in the warning mode of around 5 minutes till the hour and you turn your hands counterclockwise, you're going to screw it up. So there is a time frame. You can turn your hands counterclockwise, but don't tell your customers that, because they'll be bringing the clock back to you because it quit working. Just like this. Now I have to figure out why the rack is not dropping when it was dropping just fine. Anyway, we're gonna stop this video and we'll come back to you in the next video when I got the movement back into the clock and show you that it's working. I hope you are enjoying this video. Again, please hit the subscribe button and God bless.